Hello, I'm Daham with the Architecture Lobby, and I'm excited to introduce Cruz Garcia and Nathalie Frankowski of Loud Readers and Y Think Tank. We're really happy to have you guys participate in this project of ours, in this kind of interview series, where we're really interested in building ties between organizers just across the world and hopefully inspiring folks viewing something like this to action, to kind of knowing that there's a realm of possibility that you can engage in just related to, struggles in your workplace and in the world around you as an architectural worker. So let's I think that's kind of inspired us to be really interested in the work you're doing with Loud Readers and just how to run a political education project. So yeah, let's go into this interview. So first question, can you tell us about Loud Readers as a project and what inspired you to start this?
So Loud Readers comes out of a couple of questions, in collaborations. We've been thinking about, what does it mean to work through a post-colonial lens that imagines the world as a colony, not necessarily like what happens after the colony, but what happens after the regimes of the brutality of the colony spread everywhere. And out of that thinking, there were a couple of collaborations that we had with our antidisciplinary collective Post Novis, and one of them was to create this planetary curriculum uh, through manifestos, and teaching and new sort of bibliography. And then in 2020, the pandemic created this big interruption with education that I felt we felt it was quite cruel, especially with the students that were like, kind of dispossessed from their spaces of learning and care. And we wanted to kind of reappropriate the means of the university and redistribute them somehow. And that happened through the Zoom connection. So we started this online school based on the lectores de tabaquería, the loud readers of the tobacco factories that will loud read emancipatory literature to workers who were denied any other means of formal education. And we wanted to resurrect that practice somehow, reclaiming the means of exploitation for solidarity. And then in April, March of 2020, right? After we have done Loud Readers kind of in person, but then it became an online school officialized, right? And we launched, individual world making sessions and loud reading sessions. That summer of that year in 2020, we launched a trade school that it was like a 10-day, open school with several sessions a day. And then with time, we have been able to expand the programs, including our in-person school, right, in Puerto Rico that we launched in 2023, and other projects that we've been, thinking about an archive of the future that takes the Caribbean as a starting point for projects of emancipation. Of projects of emancipation, and thinking also about, the practice of solidarity. Like thinking about the Caribbean as a space where the plantation was created in a way, but also where the struggles for emancipation are also disseminated and turned into a planetary solidarity strategy, right? So that's more or less like the trigger of the like the how it was created in a way. You want something to add to that?
Just to add briefly to that, I feel also what was really driving us a lot was also the question of also creating a space to come together. So of course the loud reader as a platform for loud reading and for exchanging, sharing different sources of knowledges and different resources is important too. But there was also like the really as a fundamental questions, like how to create spaces, virtual or in person, to come together.
Everyone's wilding out with
it. I love this. I'm so happy. This is going to look great.
So even if we always say like work, loud readers have many different aspects, and one of them is that, right? One of them is also the idea of exchanging. One of them is also the idea of world making, of making, coming together to make something together, and also just the other component is being together. And I feel a lot of the programs are also to just try to think of a space or a place to be together in response to something current too, which is also something we've been thinking a lot with the different aspects of the programs of Loud Readers.
Yeah, that all sounds so fascinating. I am curious, I feel like I've encountered in my life like political education through, let's say, like a leftist group or kind of something tangentially related to like a union organization in the United States, or kind of a classic workers' education model, or like these kind of odd kind of like architectural association visiting school style things in our profession, these like transactional like things that exist in our field for people with money to kind of pay into like this extra piece of schooling. And your project is fascinating because kind of its orientation towards kind of architecture.
Yeah, because we are a leftist organization.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the type of education you're providing is really interesting. And I'm really curious, like, what type of people show up to something like this? And like, what are the goals you're trying to achieve in educating them?
So I wouldn't say that it's educating them. I think it's like we are all educating ourselves.
Yeah.
And since the beginning, like the mission has been anti-capitalist, at the core, anti-colonialist, like trans-feminist, anti-racist. And that's always been like the leading, trait. What interests us about the Loud Readers, particularly like Luisa Capetillo and stuff like that, they were, anarchists, they were anti-capitalists, they were anti-colonialists. And that's the part we want to resurrect. It's not just the performance of Loud Reading, but the politics, right, at the center of the project of emancipation. That's what guides everything. That's what guides. It is a political project, right? It's a political project of education. I think all projects of education are political. But this one has a clear angle, right? That is thinking about emancipation and then thinking about all the solidarities, and then who participates? I would say everybody, designers, philosophers, people that work with agroecology, poets, artists, children, people that have no profession, somebody that just heard from somebody that one workshop is taking place. I think like we have all sorts of people joining the projects at different stages all the time, right? Right now we are, sorry, this is a very chaotic interview.
This is so good.
It's 9 p.m. On a Monday. So there is right now we're doing a project with the REARC Institute, right, on the planetary pedagogies and the Loud Reading lexicon. And we have, I think, around from 40 to 60 students from all sorts, Palestine, Indonesia, Pakistan, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and that's always been the goal, right? Like, how can we think about a planetary curriculum, right? And how can we foster spaces where, our slogan in Postnovis is all the students are the teacher, right? So how when we do workshops, like the teachers literally are taking the classes too, right? So how we can break all those hierarchies, how can we work together to continue learning, right? And creating these networks of solidarity.
And I feel also the program came also as a self-critic, a lot self-critic and a critic also towards the institutions too. So I feel like for us, what's more interesting is like, how can you think platforms that are, as accessible as possible? So of course, there's always limitation when you think of, you still have to access internet and so on. But the goal, right, of the main idea is to make it easier for everybody to connect from different fields too, different types of practices, a lot of different people too, and also really try to question the tools that we use to speak or to exchange about architecture too. Because I feel like the critique would come to that, to who, if we really want to how many people we want to include in this discussion, and if we want really to be generous, and because we want this platform to learn from each other. Because when we think about, living spaces, build spaces, imagine spaces, destroy spaces, and all this, we all live through them. So how can we also find different tools around this platform that allows us to exchange about those different topics? And that push us also to go and to think beyond, of course, beyond the field of architecture. I think that came first, and also to try also to include as different ways of world making as possible.
That has me kind of wondering. I'm personally thinking with a project that I'm participating in right now with this like Venice Biennale. There's always this kind of struggle between kind of figuring out like how you participate in the kind of institutions around you and also critique them and try to create something better in the world instead. And yeah, it's like I think it's a question of like how much, how do you guys think through that question of kind of participation versus being able to mount a critique?
I mean, I think that's the quintessential question, and it happens all the way from the university, working with these machines of extraction and the replication of a social strata. I think like for something like the Venice Biennale, for me, is just very simple, right? Like it is an imperialist institution with a really kind of fascist history. And there's ways to participate where you can make a comment on the thing in itself, knowing that the thing is not really going to change and it doesn't really care too much about it, right? I also find it funny, me being Puerto Rican and coming from a colony that is a place that displays the pavilions basically of the colonizers. So that's that dynamic. But every time that we participate, inside pavilions and with like alternative projects and whatever, it's always been in the spirit of like, what type of critique can it be made without taking it too seriously, right? Knowing that it's still a game for the powerful and for the few, right? And as long as you have that in mind, there's not like too much patting in the back, like I'm decolonizing, decarbonizing, like all those bullshit titles that they put. Like we have done some collaborations, like with the Unfolding Pavilion, where we made this what was the name? Victims of Colonialism, right? And it's always like a play, like it allows us to develop a body of work that is longer through the years, where we are making comments and making jokes sometimes on social media and so on about the Biennale. But yeah, like it is what it is, it is we need other platforms. So that's what I will say. Like Venice will stay there, and then we will figure out ways to do other stuff somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. That's entirely kind of the realm that we're also thinking about. And yeah, I'm happy to approach this with a bit of humor and a bit of kind of without the pretension of high design that we were talking about. I think our last question is, what type of advice do you have for people who are trying to get involved in the kind of political struggles that you're engaging in?
Advice. I think the first one is to be honest and sincere, and to be uncompromising. Like I think those three, and to be creative and not take themselves too seriously. I feel like a lot of problems. I think one of the problems of the left is like left without humor. It makes no sense. Like I think that's when it becomes like a dogmatic, right? So we need to be able to be subversive, and use that humor and irony in the things we do. Yeah, and to be honest, like there's something about honesty, right? With the ethics, with the goals of that we're looking for emancipation and so on, that they're non-negotiable, right? Now, how we present them, that's different. But we need to have a spine in what we do. Otherwise, we're always gonna be a tool for empire, right? And I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. Like I may be a teacher, I may not be a teacher, I may be a designer, I may not be a designer, but emancipation is always at the center of everything we're doing. In whatever position we are. So I think that's maybe the most important thing.
We have to remember that we are not alone. Like we believe so much. We are ourselves part of so many different collectives, and collective in our practice shapes so many different ways, exchanges, projects, and so on. And that's also the goal of Loud Readers, right? Being like a collective of like hundreds, thousands of people and so on. Also to remember that, you know, we are not alone, and coming together sometimes is like, it's really powerful. And as Cruz mentioned, also sometimes we need to try, right? It's one thing to theorize or to dream of making a difference, making changes, or doing certain types of projects, and sometimes you just need to try it and to see where it goes, and hopefully it brings better things too.